Radio City Talks Mental Health Monday with Mick Coyle.
Yeah, Mental Health Monday is back for another week. We're sitting down with another special guest to discuss mental health issues and really interesting subject matter that we're going to touch on today. Well, to be honest, there's 1,001 different subject matters contained within this next conversation. So hopefully we'll open a few people's minds in regard to mental health and some other issues along the way, including the likes of addiction, with our guest in the studio who will be joining us to tell her story. Hopefully you want to get involved yourself. If you want to share your stories through Mental Health Monday, get involved with the show too. mick@radiocity.co.uk is the email address. That's mick@radiocity.co.uk. And we're also up and about on Twitter @Radio City Talk and Facebook as well @Radio City Talk, where you can get all the information about the podcast, how you can download that and listen to previous editions of Mental Health Monday, Facebook and Twitter. And if you're listening live on the radio, we're live on the radio. You don't need to worry about it. Just enjoy for the next 45 minutes or so. Jacquie Johnston-Lynch joins us in the studio today. Jacquie, it's wonderful to see you. Thank you for your time. People will know you from your organisation, Tom Harrison House, and how you got involved in that. And your story, though, is an incredible one, and the things that you've experienced in your life. On Mental Health Monday, we touch on 1,001 different things, from eating disorders to addictions, addictive personalities, all sorts of different conditions, depression, anxiety, and I'd guess that you've had experience, firsthand or otherwise, of pretty much all those things through the work that you've done and the life that you've had so far.
I think I might have the full bingo card, right? I can tick them all off for me, I think.
The story, I mean, there's so many different aspects and angles to this, the work you're doing with Tom Harrison House at the moment. You had a difficult childhood, is that probably fair to say? Difficult upbringing?
Yeah, so I came from a family where there was a lot of domestic violence, which was fueled by binge drink and alcoholism, really. And so for me, I kind of ended up going off the rails in my teenage years, so my mental health was very poor as an adolescent, and as a result I was hospitalised in Alder Hey and in a psychiatric unit in Chester, and then also held in a detention centre and in foster care. So it feels like it's a million miles away from there, in a place where there was, you know, often considered no hope for this adolescent who was a bit mad and a bit crazy and a bit wild, to actually now heading up an organisation and helping other people transform their lives. It's a million miles away from where I was.
At the time, were you diagnosed as somebody who had a mental health issue?
I think in those days it was never called mental health. It was all about psychiatry, and it was always about people being mad. And certainly that was the image that I grew up with, that I was mad. So as a child, and then as an adolescent, and then as a young woman, I absolutely believed on some level that I must be crazy, mad, nuts, evil, bad, a liability, dangerous, because of the system in which I'd grown up in. And as a result of doing some work with my teachers from Vancouver, who I think you're going to speak to later on, they're my therapists and teachers and now friends, I began to realise that actually that belief about being dangerous and mad had permeated the whole of my life. And actually it was that I had to change, not anything else about me, but that belief. And if I changed that belief, it would turn something around in my life, and I'd be able to help other people turn around their lives too.
So as a young person, and you're being told that you're a dangerous person or you're mad, and you get these connotations that come with straitjackets and things like that. Yeah. Did you think, well, this is me, this is how I'm thinking, this must be the way it is? Or did you ever think, oh, I'm a victim of tremendously difficult circumstances?
I think I believed, Mick, that there were people who were in authority and they were treating me in a particular way, and actually they must be believed because they're the people who have power. So if they told me I was mad, I was unwell, I was a difficult child, I was a dangerous adolescent, and they locked me up as a result, I absolutely took that on board. I didn't think at any point there must be some hope for me. I thought I would be dead by 21. I've made repeated attempts on taking my own life when I was an adolescent. I really thought that I'd be dead by the time I was 21. I had no concept, like I'm 55 this year, and I had no concept that my life would look how it is today, like that it's full and it feels fully alive and it feels purposeful. And I love my life, but I had no idea that I could do that when I was 14, 15, 16.
You've had so many knockbacks as well from life within your own home and then from outside forces as well. As you've gone on and your journey's gone on through life, Did they get easier to take? Were they more difficult to take? That every time you felt like you were getting yourself going, there was something else, another often outside force that would come and knock you back down?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one, which a lot of people in Liverpool who know me will know about, obviously my brother was killed by a drink driver, so I was in a family of addicts and alcoholics, and then the person in my family who didn't really have any problems at all was my, kind of innocent 25-year-old brother, and he was knocked down and killed by a man who had a drug and alcohol problem, who went to jail for 5 years. But for me, it was at that point where I realised something has to give here. Somebody can't have so many kind of stories, or as you say, knockbacks, situations in their lives that are hurtful and painful. Because I would give up, really, wouldn't I? If they didn't have a purpose, I would give up. So ultimately, I realised that my pain had to be turned into something purposeful. And as a result of my brother dying, lots of things were kind of born in the city, really. So there was a recovery choir, there was the Brink, the UK's first dry bar, there was Sharp, which is an addiction treatment centre, and now working with other colleagues and my co-founder Paul, Tom Harrison House. So in a way, all of these so-called negative things have absolutely borne fruit later on.
Those organisations, and we'll touch on some of the work that you're doing, they do great work now. Who were your points of contact? You talked about, when you were going up through the system, the authorities were the authorities. You just listened to them. Were there organisations, were there people you were meeting along the way who were aware of the bigger picture, who are a bit more forward-thinking? Totally,
right. So you've nailed it there. So I can think about key individuals who were from key organisations who've absolutely changed my life, and I can name them. One of them was Second Chance to Learn, which was an organisation that absolutely gave me an opportunity to go back and revisit education, and really for me to become more confident and have more expanded thinking. Another one was Northern Lights Trust, which was a personal development organisation that got people to see different aspects of their lives in a clearer way. Another one was the School of Social Entrepreneurs. They absolutely believed in me, which allowed me to go out and grow the Brink. And another one was the organisation that you're going to speak to the founders of later on, which is Clear Mind International, which is an organisation based with a head office in Vancouver, but now teaching in 5 cities in the UK. And absolutely, it's their work that was so profound and so forward-thinking that allowed me to move forward. And also, I can think of one of my social workers back then in the 70s, who was an incredible man. But, when I used to play truant from school, he would go and pick me up and walk me back through the park and take me back to school, buy me chocolate on the way and take me back to school. I mean, these days, you can't get social workers who can do that hands-on activity. So for me, he was very significant too, and those key organisations for sure.
You mentioned alcohol and addiction to alcohol being such a key factor in those sort of defining moments within your life. I think sometimes when they hear about depression, anxiety, they understand the mental health conditions, and maybe sometimes addiction is something that people can't quite get their heads around because it's, for some people, a self-inflicted thing. You've obviously been the wrong end of addiction and addictive personalities as well. How do you sum up now in terms of those types of people, what it was that saw them get addicted, and what did they find in that addiction? Did it fit into that mental health category for you?
Absolutely, it fits into mental health. For me, addiction is something that comes out of really kind of deep-rooted, profound pain, and that people are trying to self-medicate, to forget, to numb, to blot out, to take away the memory of whatever it is that they've experienced that leads them to addiction. And I've come over here from work this morning. I've just literally been in a session this morning with a man who's relapsed at the weekend. And that man is tearful, remorseful, so upset that he's returned to putting alcohol in his body after nearly 12 weeks of not using any substances at all. And for me, it's absolutely an illness. He wouldn't have placed himself in front of that quarter bottle of vodka at the weekend if he hadn't have been in so much pain and agony. That's not what he chooses in life. And today, all the other men around him have applauded him for getting himself back on track and wanting to change his life again.
Because addiction comes with certain lifestyles as well that people associate with addictions. And I think sometimes if you're trying to move away from addiction, there's this idea that you go from everything to nothing, and any step away from nothing is a failure. And I imagine through the work that you do, you see that addiction comes in all forms, but also that people try their best to come away from whatever it is they're addicted to, but don't always succeed, but unfortunately feel like they've failed as a result of doing that.
Absolutely. And you know, I was very, very lucky that when my brother was killed, my 12-year-old son at the time, he's now in his 30s, but my 12-year-old son at the time was an exceptional player at the academy for Everton, and he went off the rails completely as a result of his own depression and this trauma of his father figure being killed, you know. But he eventually got into rehab. And he only took one go at rehab, and he's been clean and sober. In July, he's 10 years clean and sober, and he doesn't touch any substances at all. But for him, that was an absolute blessing. For other people, it might take 5, 6, 7, 8 goes at rehab or treatment, you know, to try and get themselves completely clean and sober. And many people see themselves as failing along the way. We don't see it like that. We see it as, you know, there's yet another obstacle, and what we're going to do is turn that obstacle into an opportunity and just keep going with people and loving them where they're at.
So you've had alcohol addiction and addiction within your own family, obviously growing up within your own house, and then it was an addict who took the life of your brother as well.
Mm-hmm.
If you wanted to, you could be absolutely furious about that. You could hate the sight of anyone who would touch a drop of alcohol. You could choose to take a certain attitude with the world. Instead, you've shown incredible empathy to not only show compassion to people like these sorts of people we're talking about, but also to go and help them.
Mm-hmm.
You've almost tackled those demons head on and almost said, well, this happened to me, but I don't want it to happen to other people.
That's exactly it. My youngest son has Asperger's, and he doesn't quite he's got no social filter, so he says things how they come out. And he said to me, I wish I'd have met your brother. It was sad that he died and I didn't get to meet him. And about an hour later he said, actually, no, Mummy, I'm glad that your brother was killed. And I was like, what? What do you mean? And then he said, because I realise how many people have been helped because you lost your only brother. And all those people wouldn't have been helped if you didn't. And he sums it up, you know, with no social filter whatsoever. But he sums it up perfectly in that, what purpose would there have been to his death, to his loss, if I just carried that hate around in my heart and then just hated everyone? Actually, from his loss, there has been huge purpose created in the city, and there's a big legacy in the city of people also doing that too.
There's an incredible clarity of mind that comes with people with Asperger's who see through something in a way you would never have considered it. But it's an incredible way of looking at it. You've used the phrase a couple of times. Let's look at this idea of turning pain into purpose. Mm-hmm. That's not just a switch, is it? Pain, purpose. There's a journey, isn't there? There's a spectrum. You've got to go through a few more steps in between, presumably.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when the person who killed my brother was coming out of the court on the first day of the hearing. He was coming out of the court. He'd got bail, and he came out of the court in a vehicle with his father driving it. And I remember I had so much venom and so much hate against him. It had only been a matter of, I think, days, not even a week, since he'd killed my brother. And I threw myself on his vehicle and was screaming at him, and police had to pull me off the vehicle, off the bonnet of the car. Now, that is going to come up. That's a natural response to trauma, right? To have that thing of, I want to get retribution on you. But at some point I realised that there was no good me living in that state of retribution, of hate, of disrespect, because it was hurting me, not him. And there was a point where I did some work with this organisation in Vancouver, and their phrase was turning pain into purpose. And I just thought, I can't see that ever happening to me. My life's been so horrible. I can't see that I would be able to cultivate living in a state of love and peace, right? I couldn't ever imagine that could be my life. And actually working with them and doing their workshops and living their philosophy absolutely transformed that. But it took a while, right? It wasn't the switch that goes, yeah, let's flick on purpose right from pain. It doesn't work like that. You have to really go into the depths of what's going on, feel it, you know, stay in there, have a good look around, and then make a proper choice.
how many, are we talking months? Are we talking years?
No, you're talking years for me. It took me a while. But I think, overall, in the space of 5 years, I had really reconciled so much and, forgiven so many other things that I'd experienced as a youngster too. And as a result of that, I think it's allowed me during the past 7 years to absolutely apply my purpose, particularly in this city for sure.
We're going to hear about some of the great work that you're doing very soon on the programme. The Jacquie that's sitting in front of us and people are listening to today, is that you? Were you always you, or was there a different Jacquie trying to find a way out? Was there a point where you thought, now I am who I am. I'm not the person who's been, set aside because of my mental health conditions. I'm not somebody who's going to be defined by my upbringing. I'm not going to be defined by terrible things that have happened in my life. Are you comfortable in your own skin now?
Absolutely, 100%. And I think for me, feeling comfortable in my own body, in my own skin, in my life, in my job, with my kids, with my family, with my relationships, is all down to the work that I've done. It wasn't something that I just sat back and waited for life to change. I absolutely had to get up and do some work, and hopefully we'll hear about that a little bit later.
Radio City Talk. Tackling the stigma.
Yeah, my name's Mick. We've got Jacquie Johnston-Lynch in the studio. We're talking about her life and the work that she does. We're going to hear about all the great organisations that she's worked for. But a couple of times in the conversation, you mentioned a way of thinking, Jacquie, that helped you out. Just explain again. This was the pain and the purpose, wasn't it?
Yeah, so that's, I think somebody's mentioned before, if they Google me, that phrase comes up on the websites, pain into purpose. And where I first met that phrase was working with an organisation called Clear Mind International, which is based in Vancouver, but now runs out of 5 cities in the UK. And we bring their teachers over, Dwayne and Catherine O'Kane, to teach their philosophy. They're a transpersonal psychotherapy organisation, and they run workshops and they also train people to be counsellors. It's all about kind of self-help, personal development, as well as professional development. And it has been absolutely life-changing and transforming for me, for sure.
Well, we thought we'd get Dwayne O'Kane on the show, who
Brilliant.
can explain what it's all about. Dwayne, thank you for your time. Thanks for joining us on Mental Health Monday. We've got Jacquie in the studio. It's fair to say she's a big fan of your work.
Oh, that's relieving to hear.
Just tell us about the idea behind authentic connection, these real connections that people maybe aren't making in their life, but can make in their life, that can make a real difference.
Well, I've been listening to your interview with Jacquie thus far, and I certainly appreciate all her wonderful comments and comments she attributes, much of her personal transformation to the work she's done. She's been an ardent student of the work for sure. The whole idea of the power of authentic connection, that's the book we've recently published. And dovetailing with what Jacquie has said, and particularly if we want to talk about addictions and addictive lifestyles, this quest to relieve ourselves of the burden of pain inside of us is a very tragic course, obviously, for a whole lot of people. And the pain inside of us ultimately originates not just from what happened to us as children, but actually what we then did with it ourselves, which is to isolate. We make up some pretty profound beliefs about ourselves, but why this is happening to me? Why am I in an alcoholic home where our neighbors aren't like that? How come we're like this? And we make up profound things about ourselves that ultimately are not true. And the real damage we do to ourselves is in that what we make up, not just what happened to us, but what we do with it and then live with and keep hidden in the basement of our psyches. And then we isolate. Rather than being ourselves about what we're going through and what we're fearing about ourselves, we end up representing ourselves with what we call a strategic self, or a mask to survive in the world. But we're essentially isolated because we're not really being ourselves. And we're not really in connection. And we're never going to heal what we made up about ourselves in the basement of our psyches until we come back into connection again, because that's where the problem started. All of our problems ultimately started in connection with an important other, mother, father, relationships, important others. It's in that connection and navigation and negotiation with relationship that we make up all these things. And that's where they have to get healed too. Rather than just reading a book or hearing a lecture.
Is it almost like
actual contact?
Dwayne, is it almost like rewiring your head? Because you've created so many different ideas within your own head about who you are and why you're like that. But you're talking almost like you're relearning who you are. You're making those new connections again.
Yes, well, and the rewiring will only occur when we kind of return to the scene of the crime in a way, in relationship where our anxiety is up and we're having to contact people. Then all those old memories are coming up, and the work we do, and the work Jackie did, was kind of reveal her inner world as she's, trying to make contact with people again. And that's when we got to know the little girl she left behind way back there. She's the one we had to get to know. She's the one that had to change her mind about herself. She's the one that made up that she was essentially evil and bad and defective. But we got to meet her authentically. We didn't just talk about her. We met her. And the acceleration of healing is profound when we can get right to the bottom of meeting the one deep inside and not just kind of talking about it or medicating that one.
Mm. Dwayne, the book is called Real.
It's astonishing.
The Power of Authentic Connection, written by yourself and Catherine O'Kane. We really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing your kind words about Jackie. We're going to hear some more about the work that Jackie's done, and she puts a lot of it on you and the work that you've done. So thank you for your time on Mental Health Monday today. We really appreciate you coming on board.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate you creating this space for people to actually have discussions and dialogue about mental health, because we certainly need it.
Hey, we appreciate it. Not a problem at all. That's Dwayne O'Kane. There you go. He's a big fan of what you're doing with it there as well.
I think it's great when you meet somebody, this particular couple, Dwayne and Catherine O'Kane, who have absolutely transformed the lives of so many people. And I've just literally been with them in Birmingham. They've just been running a workshop in Birmingham. And the messages that I've had on my phone this morning, to WhatsApp, to Facebook, from 16 participants who've had their lives changed this weekend as a result of doing this work and kind of reading the book and taking the workshops. It feels like just so profound to think that so many of us have had our lives changed as a result of working with them. So I do feel very, very grateful, for sure.
Many people go on their own journey with mental health, and sometimes that will involve people taking tablets. That'll involve people getting involved in therapy. We've heard on this show people who get involved in things like sport. You're talking about a book there. Now, it's not a tablet. You don't take that once a day, but you're talking about a way of thinking, which is a form of treatment, which if this was a medical, physical condition, you break your arm, you've got to put it in a plaster. But this is one of many different ways that people can find their own way through mental health battles. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think you're right, is that we all have to make our own good, informed personal choices about what works for us in our mental health. Maybe what works for me absolutely wouldn't work for you. And certainly, what works for other people certainly might not work for me, and I think it's good that we don't do that one-size-fits-all thing.
You helped to set up The Brink in Liverpool. The good news is that because we interviewed David Barnacle from The Brink, people can listen to that episode of the podcast, hear all about why it was set up, how it was set up, and how it works in Liverpool now. But you're also involved in Tom Harrison House. Just explain when the idea of Tom Harrison House came around and some of the issues that you tackle regularly on that particular subject.
I was working at another treatment centre and noticed that there are good outcomes for people who are military veterans were quite poor. And at the same time, a colleague of mine, Paula Gunn, she had the idea that she wanted to set up a treatment centre specifically for military veterans. And I kind of laughed at her because I thought, we're in a period of austerity, nobody's funding drug and alcohol treatment anymore, and you're going to come up with this brand new idea to treat military veterans specifically. No one is going to fund that. But actually, I knew that it was valid, and she knew that it was valid, and she said, well, I want you to come on board, leave your job and help do this. And so the two of us have worked solidly together with a brand new team around us for the past 3 years. And we are the only UK treatment centre doing this. So we are now gathering the evidence. We've been to America and sourced all the early evidence from there. We've worked in treatment centres out in New York. We've brought their models back over here. And we're now seeing, the rewards of that. Many graduates clean and sober, people coming from all over the UK. The MOD sitting up and taking notice. So the Ministry of Defence in Whitehall now kind of are supporting us. And really, I think it's amazing that we're actually having this level of success.
I sat down with a couple of former squaddies who'd gone through the armed forces and had come out the other side, and they call it returning to Civvy Street.
Yeah.
And I was amazed at the stories that they were telling of the difficulties of returning to, quote, Civvy Street, where to us it just seems like normal life. I spoke to one guy who'd come out of the armed forces, and he struggled with things like he couldn't understand if somebody was getting on a bus but didn't have the right change in their hand when they were stepping on the bus. Like, what was the point in queuing for the bus if you weren't going to sit there? And it was really simple things that were day-to-day lives, which a lot of people would not have given a second thought to, but actually was quite difficult for a lot of people. His concern that there wasn't an officer's mess when you just lived in a flat. That at 8 o'clock, you put the TV on or you went to bed, whereas in the armed forces, you were almost institutionalised to a certain point where you always had these reliefs, these infrastructures in place. And it was the real simple things which were so difficult. And I had never even given it a consideration that somebody would struggle when they returned to Civvy Street. But it's almost as if they're opting out of one life and moving into an entirely different life. Yeah,
totally. I think you've got that right there in that the guys particularly we see, or mainly all squaddies, not everyone, but mainly squaddies. And what's happened for them is often they come from very poor areas, so working class areas where maybe the expectations around education and employment weren't very high, or they also had kind of problematic families like where I came from, so kind of broken relationships, domestic violence, alcoholism, and so they went into the army to get away from all of that basically, and then they found this family and this kind of perfect life in the army, albeit they had to go into combat for that, but they still found this sense of belonging. But then when they came out, that belonging had just been completely fractured, and they had no idea who they were, how did they ever get back to belonging again, and how did they function in so-called Civvy Street, in civilian life. And I was recently at a conference and heard people talking about, military men talking about periods of transition, how squaddies should be having a period of at least a year's transition before they come back into civilian life. But actually the squaddies there were saying, well, we had drug and alcohol problems, we didn't get any transition at all, we were just booted out. And then one of them said, to one of the commanding officers, sir, what's the transition period for a military canine? And in his shame, he said, it's 2 years. So a military dog, will be rehabilitated over a period of 2 years. But a squaddie who has a drug and alcohol problem will likely get a stipend to get on the train, a voucher to get on the train and get told, you're being discharged, and very, very quickly will be out of the system without a proper transition or without proper medical or social care.
So the aftercare that we have for the mental health of our armed forces as things stand is actually below that of the aftercare that a military dog would receive. It
has been, and it can be, particularly in drug and alcohol circumstances, for sure. Because I'm still not sure that the military, that the MOD, see drug and alcohol addiction as their responsibility, so a mental health issue. I think they absolutely now take on board that other mental health issues, so for instance anxiety and depression and PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder, are all taken very seriously now in the military, but I still don't think that addiction and alcoholism is, for sure.
What's the long-term path of Tom Harrison House? Because obviously you're dealing with people all the time. Is there long-term goals, or is it a series of short-term goals for individuals?
No, it's long-term goals, really. What we would like is to see people abstinent, clean and sober, living happy, active, productive lives in Civvy Street, right? So part of our job is to get them acclimatised back into civilian life, but also to be able to make sure that they're clean and sober in that they have employment opportunities in that, and also that they turn their own pain into purpose, right? So we see that as massively important for them, that they are purposeful when they come out the other side. Otherwise, what's the point of not having drugs and alcohol in your life if you've got no purpose?
If people want to find out some more information about your story, Tom Harrison House, the fundraising that you're doing, the awareness that you're raising from this, what's the best place for people to go to?
Yeah, I think really it would be to go to the Tom Harrison House website, so tomharrisonhouse.org.uk. Have a look at what we do there. If you want to make contact with me at all, if you want to find out anything to do with Clear Mind or any personal development workshops, absolutely contact me there too. And anybody who wants to donate to Tom Harrison House, we're an incredibly poor charity, so of course if anyone wants to make a donation there, absolutely go online and go via PayPal.
And do you find that when people go through the system that they pay it back, that they come back around?
Absolutely. All our graduates are incredible. Even at the weekend, they were doing stuff with the Lord Mayor's charity. The Lord Mayor's been amazing with us, and we're one of her charities this year. And so the guys were out volunteering for her on Sunday, and they'd just been volunteering at a project in the Lake District as well. So they were all completely knackered, but they went out there and did a load of fundraising on Sunday too.
Brilliant. TomHarrisonHouse.org.uk. And Jackie, we really appreciate you coming on Mental Health Monday. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you.
Radio City Talk. Tackling the stigma.
All right, here's a little extra now for the podcast listeners. So Mental Health Monday runs on the radio as a live show every Monday from 2:15 on Radio City Talk. Occasionally, though, throughout the course of the week, mental health stories do crop up. So we like to bring you those stories and wrap them up as part of this Mental Health Monday podcast. We were joined by Tom Madders from Young Minds. Now, Tom is from an organisation which has carried out a survey of teachers. And the teachers who responded to this survey are concerned about the mental health of our young people, and in particular, an education service that appears to prioritise exam results over the health and happiness of young people. Here's the conversation we had on Radio City Talk.
Mental Health Monday with Mick Coyle.
This is Radio City Talk.
I've got a story here which relates to teachers, students and schools. A majority of teachers think exam results are prioritised over the well-being of pupils, a charity has claimed. The government is being urged to tackle what has been described by Young Minds as a mental health crisis within UK classrooms. Let's get a take on this now with Tom Madders, who's the campaigns director for Young Minds, and he joins us on the programme. Tom, thank you for your time.
Good morning.
What's the situation here? So teachers are being told to focus on exam results and not well-being within students. Is there a well-being in students league table? I think we judge pupils and schools on exam results now, don't we?
We do judge schools very much on exam results. And what we are calling for at Young Minds today with our Wise Up campaign is for the government to take a look at the education system, rebalance it so that well-being of students is considered as important as academic achievement. So we have today, I think, undisputed, a mental health crisis in our classrooms. Theresa May herself said that. We've seen 90% of teachers think that they've seen a rise in things like stress and depression in their pupils over the last 5 years. Number of children hospitalised for self-harming has doubled since 2010 and continues to rise. We've got around 3 children in every classroom who would have what we would consider to be a diagnosable mental health problem. So it's a huge, huge issue. And we've got young people who spend a lot of time in schools. Now, schools aren't there to be a mental health service. That's not what we're saying. But what we are saying is that schools play a really, really important role in the well-being of young people. And we need to see an education system which helps schools and supports schools to prioritise the well-being of their students.
How do you make that a priority then? What happens within schools? What do schools change? What government investment do you make into schools which changes these facts?
So it's partly about how a school is asked to deliver. So at the moment, the things that a school is considered to be good or to be failing on is almost all about academic achievement. So schools at the moment, lots and lots of schools are trying to prioritise this stuff. Are putting in things like yoga class or mindfulness lessons, or investing in school counsellors, or having 5 minutes at the end of a day to allow young people to, air concerns. There are lots and lots of initiatives going on in schools, but at the moment, teachers aren't being recognised for this stuff. So over 90% of teachers are saying that they want more recognition for the work they are doing on wellbeing. And we think that it's basically a fundamental question about what the government is telling schools that they are there for. So we are asking for a change in legislation which basically embeds well-being as a part of the duty of a school.
So what would happen and how would that play out? You can get an Ofsted rating of, requiring improvement, good, outstanding. You can get a school league table, which will tell you how many A to C's, etc., that a school has achieved. What would a well-being or mindfulness rating for a school look like, and how would that be sort of fit into the structure of how we grade schools at the moment?
So what we're saying is that when schools are doing this stuff, it needs to be recognised. So that does include things like Ofsted inspections. So when Ofsted are coming into a school, they're not just looking at, not just focusing on academic stuff. They are looking at what the school is doing here. And that would be that will be factored in heavily into Ofsted reports, so that a school does get the recognition that it deserves for that kind of activity, but also so that parents and young people themselves can make decisions about schools and understand about schools based on what it does in that area. So we know that many parents from our polling have said that they would want to make a decision about what school their child goes to based on what it does on wellbeing. And we also know that 73% of parents, so almost 3/4, would choose a school where the children were happier, but the exam results were poorer over one which was the other way around.
We've got Tom Madders with us on Radio City Talk, Campaigns Director for Young Minds, talking about this fear that exam results are prioritised over pupils' well-being. You said as part of the survey you found that, teachers are going about a lot of this mindfulness work and yet feel like they're not getting the credit for it. Is there not a danger, Tom, that actually if you introduce mindfulness or pupil happiness as like an official statistic associated with a school, that essentially schools end up doing what they've had to do with exam results, which is you play a certain game, you pay certain lip service to it, and actually having a service which might be underrepresented and not get the credit it deserves is actually a really positive service. It's a nuanced service. It's not got people constantly looking over your shoulder saying, well, are your children happy? I don't think they're happy, so I'm going to mark your school down. There should be like a flexibility to it, a nuance to it, because that's the nature of young people and their own mental health.
Yeah, you're absolutely right that we don't want this to become a tick box exercise. It shouldn't be something that only happens because schools feel like they have to do it. But as I said, a lot of schools are already trying to do this stuff. What's difficult about it is that resources within schools are very, very tight. So as a school leadership team, as a school governance board, you have to prioritise and you really have to focus your efforts on the things that get measured, on the things that you're accountable to the government on the things that would make your school be considered a good school or a failing school. And if we can make well-being be a much greater part of what those factors are, then it's much easier for schools to be able to prioritise resources for it. And I should also say that what we're calling for as part of this campaign is more resource for schools. So we do want to see the government support schools by giving additional resource in order to help schools to do more of these activities.
And I guess the other thing is, we're talking about schools here, but, there's 24 hours in a day and you spend 6, 7, maybe 8 if you've got breakfast clubs and after-school clubs as well within the school environment. So not the majority of your day. And you're in school not 52 weeks in a year, but, 39 weeks in a year. And you're only there 5 days a week and not 7 days a week. There's a lot of pupils who will be having a tough time of it within a classroom and maybe school might be the respite for them, because actually their home life is so dreadful, and if you can't deal with the home life, and if they're coming from a negative place when it comes to their own home and their family or whatever background that they've got, actually it doesn't make a difference what's going on in the school, because the majority of their time is actually not spent within a classroom.
A huge amount of a young person's time is spent at school, and while you're absolutely right, I mean, a school can't control factors outside of that child's time at school. It can certainly help the young person to open up about things that are happening, to talk about their experiences, to take measures to build their own resilience. And also a lot of schools will work with families, will work with parents, will, if they are doing work to identify things that a child might be having difficulty with outside of school, to take a holistic approach and talk to families and talk about home life and try and put in place things that might help that child to cope with what's going on outside of school.
Where do you take your campaign, Tom? What sort of people are you speaking to and what sort of reaction have you had so far?
Well, we've launched this morning. This afternoon, our Chief Executive, Sarah Brennan, is going to be in front of the Education and Health Select Committees, giving evidence on this very issue. At the end of April, we will be sending a letter to Theresa May calling for her to rebalance the education system. We're reaching out to anyone who wants to support the campaign, whether you're a parent, a young person, a teacher or a school, to visit our website where you'll find a mechanism by which you can sign up to the open letter and we would encourage all of your listeners to do so.
Brilliant stuff. Tom, thank you for your time today, and we'll get this into our Mental Health Monday podcast as well, which people will be able to download and listen again, get all the information through our social media. So we appreciate you coming on the programme today.
Thanks so much.
And that wraps up Mental Health Monday for another week. We really appreciate you downloading the podcast via Audio Boom or iTunes. If you're able to like, subscribe, share it on social media, that will be absolutely wonderful. And don't forget, Mental Health Monday is live on Radio City Talk every Monday from 2:15. We're on 1548 medium wave DAB digital radio, and you can check us out via the Radio City app as well. We'll catch you next time.
Mental Health Monday on Radio City Talk. Tackling the stigma.